All right, welcome to COMP123 in the summer of 2020 semester, and it's week 4, part 1 of our broadcast. This week we're going to do an intro to me as well as, or today anyway, and a review of some of the concepts we've learned last week about classes and objects and those kind of things. We're going to go over that again, and I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I'm expecting of you that might be slightly different than what you may have learned or what you're used to with Professor Narendra. So we kind of have to do some of that this week as well. And then I'll also make sure that I leave a little bit of time so that we can manage some questions at the end. Okay. So again, just like I said, as a lots of people are coming in at the last minute. Just as a protocol perspective, please keep your mics muted. I would ask you to do that as we start this. So here we are, COMP123 Programming 2, and this is me. So it's a little bit of an older picture, a couple of years. But, and now with COVID-19, the hair is a little longer than this. But more or less, that's me. That's how you can get a hold of me. I've been teaching students since 2011. So it's been a bit. The other thing I want to tell you is my specialty or my my interests are in game development and specifically VR, right? So I've been doing a lot of VR over the last 3 or 4 years now. So that's kind of what I'm focusing my master's on, that I'm working on. VR and security, specifically machine learning. So it's kind of interesting, a little bit of a mishmash of stuff. It's been a bit of a journey. So that's where I'm at right now and who I am. A couple things to note is that I broadcast, like I said, all my classes on YouTube, and it shows here that I've got more than 1,600 videos on YouTube, and that's true. It's probably closer to 1,700 now. When we say 1,700, guys, please understand I'm not a YouTuber. What I'm doing actually is recording all my classes. I've been doing this for a long, long time, almost from the beginning, and a lot of it is because I find that I go too fast. Students really are the driver behind all this. They said, hey, Professor, it's hard to follow, because there's a lot of stuff you're doing. I'm new to C#, I'm new to JavaScript, I'm new to whatever language we're new, and could you slow down? So that's what's kind of driven this whole thing with YouTube. And now with remote learning, teaching and learning, it's kind of a natural fit. I do find it a little bit more challenging than when you guys are in front of me, because I usually record classes with everybody, even when I'm in front of you in a classroom, right? But the difference is I get to see your faces, hear your voices. I can see that you understand or you don't understand. I can get a sense of that. Here, it's a little bit more challenging. I can't really get a sense of do you understand or not. So when you don't understand something, or if you have a question, please use the chat on Zoom to ask a question. I will be looking at it periodically to make sure that I can answer your questions as we go. Okay. Sometimes you can also speak up if you want me to slow down. You can say, "Can you repeat that?" or whatever. But remember that everything that I'm going to show you is going to be in 2 places. One on YouTube, and the other thing I do a lot is I use Github online. I share all my code online with you. So as we go. And I'm also going to ask you to share your code on GitHub this semester. So we're going to be talking about how to do that and a few new tools around that as we go forward. Okay. So before we begin, any questions for me? Because I know this is the first time you guys are meeting me for the most part. And if you actually look at the YouTube feed right now, you can actually see it. So if you go to this link right here, on eCentennial, that's the YouTube feed, so you can see me live. And if you need, like I said, closed captioning support, if you're not a native speaker, if it helps you, or if you want to slow me down or speed me up, that's the way to do it, through YouTube at the same time that I'm broadcasting live with you. Okay, so one of the great things is that as I broadcast live on YouTube, it's also being recorded, so you don't have to record this session on Zoom for yourself. You can always go back and kind of look at the videos, and I do encourage that. I do have some feedback on that too. I have to be honest, right? And I'm sure you guys have this for other professors, but you're in a class and you're here for 2 hours, and then maybe I go too fast, maybe you don't understand, and then guess what? You have to go back on YouTube and watch it again. So it's like you're doing, the class twice, and I don't want that to happen. So what I'd like to try and do as much as possible to mitigate that is I'll look over at the chat. Please ask your questions, and I'll try and answer them as we go forward. Okay? So again, one more time, any questions before we go on? And by the way, this is one of the other things that I miss. Normally, when I look at you in a real classroom, I get a feedback like, nope, no more questions, Professor. We can go on now. But now I get silence, which is kind of what happens online. All right, so just a recap of where we're at, what we're studying, and all that kind of stuff as I'm taking over from Professor Narendra today for the first day. So this is not new for me. I've been doing C# for a while. But let's talk about the schedule. So these are the things that you are looking at. Test number 1 and test number 2 is scheduled, and we'll talk about that in a second, right? And also, you're supposed to be using this book, Visual C# 2015. Again, like Professor Narendra probably told you, you don't have to buy the book, and most of the stuff that you'll be needing we'll be discussing in class. So just to make sure that you guys are on the same page. I know it's a bit of a restart because you guys have this already from day 1, but let's talk about it in 2 seconds. Next, we're sitting around week 4, so I've just put up our little schedule here. I'll be showing you this schedule every single week with a little arrow telling you where we're at and what we should be using or doing, right? And notice right now you have assignment 2 that's been delivered to you, and you already have a due date for that coming up. So that's assignment 2. And so far, from what it says here on the schedule, the things you should know how to do up to date are basic methods, advanced methods from last semester. Again, also classes. You've learned about classes and objects. And last week we talked about a couple things, properties, destructors, constructors, overloading constructors, and potentially this week we're going to just cover partial classes and nested classes a little bit with a new topic, which I'm going to skip. I'm going to kind of do a skip from here, and I'm going to go all the way to week 8. That's how it's going to be, right? And we're going to get back to exception handling another day next week, but I'm going to probably hit inheritance a little earlier this semester, and the reason for this is because we've got a bit of a crunch in terms of the data that I have to kind of go over with you guys, right? Notice also that test 1 is supposed to be scheduled for week 8, so that's something that we're going to be looking at, and also you'll be getting another assignment by week 7, which is in a few short weeks from now. Okay, so that's where we're at right now, and the schedule is here online. I'll be updating it as we go, so you know where we're at and what we're doing. Okay, so that's kind of what we're doing. So today and this week's activities for this this PowerPoint, again, a bit of an introduction. I'm going to talk about some tools that I use compared to maybe what Professor Narendra uses. I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, and in terms of any questions that you have and so on. So just so that we're all clear on stuff that we're doing. Okay. So, let's stop the PowerPoint for 1 sec and go over to, we don't need this. I want to go over to Visual Studio 2019. So that's the first thing on the agenda for me. So remember, we talked about tools really briefly. The tool that I'm going to be using through the entire semester is Visual Studio 2019. All right, so I'm not using 2017. 2017 is over. So if you've been using 2017 up until now, please update, upgrade, whatever you have to do by the next day, which would be Wednesday, and make sure you get 2019 if you can. If you don't, or if you can't somehow, I'm not sure why, because you can download it from online for free. Okay, so let's just go there for a second. So if you go to Visual Studio 2019, you can get the community edition even if you don't go through the Centennial College stuff. you can just like literally go up online and download Visual Studio for Windows for free, the free community edition. Okay. However, we also offer Visual Studio 2019 one day when my internet feels like doing what it's supposed to do. You can also get Visual Studio 2019 through our eCentennial portal, which you should know how to do right now. So, but I will be using 2019, not 2017. So if you have that, please update for next time. The other thing is, I'm also going to be, as an aside, using Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is slightly different than Visual Studio. I'm not going to program with Visual Studio Code. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code as an editor. So if you see me bringing up Visual Studio Code, it's just for an editor, just for that reason. Sometimes I like to copy and paste from here and so on. I'm just telling you, I'm sharing you with what tools I'll be using. So Visual Studio 2019 and VS Code for sure. The other thing I'll be using a lot is GitHub. So I use GitHub. I'm going to show you this. So you can, if you go to github.com, and then if you go to /Centennial College, and I'll put this link on eCentennial for you. So let's just get back to eCentennial for 1 sec. Here it is. I'm going to make this new link just for you. This is the all the code that I'm going to be using across all classes. All right. So this is again GitHub link for the course code going forward. Okay. So I'm not going to be sharing course code with you up online on eCentennial. It'll be strictly on GitHub. Okay. So you'll be looking there. And that's a good practice because most developers have some kind of version control that they use. So please look at GitHub from now on. So even starting today, when we're going to start, doing some examples, it'll be all up on GitHub. Okay, so please note that. So a couple things that we're going to be doing. So also, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to ask you to do GitHub. So if you don't have an account for GitHub, please sign up today. So how do you get there? Again, if you go to github.com just by itself, and we'll do this with a incognito mode so you can see it. So if I just go to github.com, and if you've never signed up before, you'll get this screen. It looks like this. So please, if you haven't had a chance to do that, sign up for GitHub because I'll be asking you to share your repository with me. All right, so that's one thing that you'll be doing. A couple of other things that we're going to be doing because we're remote, and what I've been doing with all my other classes is every time you hand in an assignment, I'm going to be asking you for a video. Yeah, a video, which means you need to know how to make little videos for me. So why a video? I want to know it's you. I want to know it's you that's doing it. You're going to explain to me how you do everything in your assignment. It's going to be like almost like a little report that you're going to be putting together. So I typically use, for my tools, I use something called OBS, which is Open Broadcaster software. That's what I use to capture my screen. I highly recommend learning how to use this thing. You'll probably be using it for other classes at some point in the future, and I think it's a good tool for you guys to know how to use. I will show you how to do the basics when the time comes. And again, I'm going to be asking you to show me a little video of what you do. One part of what OBS does, and if you notice there's a few panels here in OBS, in the sources panel, you can specify which screen or webcam you want to capture, and as well as an audio source. And then what you can do is you can capture your screen. I'm not looking for you to video yourself necessarily. I'm just listening. I want to listen to you speak about your assignment in detail and show me your assignment with Visual Studio 2019. So you have to know what you're doing. It's not just about coding and handing it in. I want to know that you're doing it. Think about it as a little oral exam as we go forward. So again, I know some of you are really nervous about this because you've never recorded a video before. Don't be nervous. Don't worry about it. You know, we're all learning as we go forward this semester, and it's one of the things that are going to make you stronger because over the next little while, specifically over the next 6 months or so, you may have a chance to do more remote chat, video, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, all that kind of stuff, and you need to be able to capture your screen and send it over and do all kinds of stuff that maybe in other semesters there would be no need to do. This semester there's a need, so I'm going to get you guys to record everything for your assignment, and it'll be worth a mark, which means for assignment number 2 that you've got going on right now that's due, I guess it would be week 6 or whatever, There might be an additional requirement where you have to, produce your video. If you don't produce your video, I won't accept your assignment. And that's how it's going to be. So for a couple reasons. One of them is, again, it's about security, really, at the end of the day. I've never met you, and I want to know that it's your work. So it's going to be a way for you to show me your work and discuss it with me. And you can go slow. It doesn't have to be a big video. It could be like 3 to 5 minutes, that kind of stuff. So just look forward to this. It's going to happen over time. So if you haven't had a chance to, please download OBS or something like it. You can use any other kind of software to do it. And you need a YouTube account, because I'm going to ask you to put it up on YouTube. I'm not going to download 300 megs of video from eCentennial, that's for sure. So you need a link to YouTube. So there's a bit of a couple things that you need to do extra as we go forward in the semester. And I'll be prompting you on how to do this. I'll be talking about your tools and requirements as we go forward. Okay, so YouTube definitely is something that you want to subscribe to, or Vimeo if you really want some older stuff. If you really like Twitch and you're one of those people who likes to stream live on Twitch, any online provider is fine, as long as I can click on the link and go to the video and not download it. If I have to download your video, I won't accept it. Just letting you know. Other tools that I'm going to ask you to use are 7-zip. Okay, so when you hand stuff in with me, I will not accept .rar files. Any .rar file for me is not going to be a thing. 7-zip. Please download and install 7-zip for you. It's a free download, and I'll put this link on eCentennial. So why 7-zip and not RAR? Well, sometimes for whatever reason, RAR has a funny way of binding and linking files for Visual Studio, so I'd ask you not to do that. I am going to ask you for your entire project for Visual Studio, and which is a little different that you may be used to as well. So this is 7-zip. Okay, so this is 7-zip is what I want you as a tool. I'll say please download. Okay, so that's this one that's up on eCentennial as well. So again, we're talking tools right now. Okay, so 7-zip, and you know what? I might as well put in OBS, because I think OBS is a great tool as well. So let's go back to the OBS again and then get that link for you guys. So this is the thing. It's a free project, nothing for you to pay, which is a great thing, and it's come a long way since it first started. It has a million tools, and there's tons of videos online on how to use OBS. I think it's a really good tool for you guys to use. I'll say please download. All right. So a couple of downloads. One thing to notice is that it really depends on your machine how fast things happen for you. And I know that some of you don't have the fastest machines or whatever, but one thing you need to have, and I got to tell you this, you need to have audio working. So if you don't have a pair of headphones, get them. All right, I'm going to ask you sometimes to speak, and there's not going to be an excuse past next week for you guys to come up online and answer questions if I ask you a question, or to record stuff. So if I ask you to record stuff and you say like, hey, I don't have a mic, it's not going to be an excuse after next week. So please get a mic or get a headset. I recommend a headset because the headset's usually a little easier for you guys to get. You can use older headsets from your phone as well, but please try not to use your mic from your computer, and I'll tell you why. A lot of times you get a lot of background noise, fan noise, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't come out great, and whenever you do your recording, one of the challenges that I always have is I can't hear you. If I can't hear you, and if you can't hear yourself on a video, the video's no good. So I need you guys to make sure you have a good mic. Okay, so that's something that I recommend. If you have a little bit of money, digital mics are always the best, and I will share with you which one I have. So if you go to Amazon, it's up to you. Totally optional here, but if what I like to look at is Blue microphones. They're really a great company that people use for podcasts and a bunch of other stuff. I typically have the Blue Snowball, and you can see the Blue Snowball Ice is $68, and you're like, wow, that's a lot of money. It's actually not for what you get. This is a cardioid mic, which is really, really cool. on Amazon, and what that means is you get really solid quality with no compromise. So I think it's a pretty good price for it to be, you know, the money that it is. You plug and play. That's really how good it is. So, you know, if you don't have a webcam, maybe that's not as important, but a mic, super important for you guys to have, or at least some kind of headset. And there's lots of really cool gaming headsets and stuff that you can use, but that's definitely something I recommend. Okay, so I'm just putting this out there because I'm going to need you guys to talk. And like I said, after next week, no excuses. Okay, any questions for me before we continue? Because I know I threw a lot of stuff at you there, and some people might have questions or concerns. Any questions or concerns? I'm looking at the chat, by the way. I'm not listening to you from, I don't expect you to come up on the mic. And again, if you do, you're going to be recorded on YouTube. So everyone's clear? You guys are good? You guys are going to be future videographers and vloggers. Okay, clear, cool. All right. Any other person have a concern? That's what I'm asking. Is there anyone who has a concern? I know some people have. Here's something that I got to bring up. What about if you have you're at home or you're broadcasting from a place where it's not quiet sometimes? What do? You got to pick a time when the babies are quiet. You got to pick a time where, you know, the family's not eating and making noise and all that stuff to do it. That means you have to schedule that kind of stuff. Do you need to record your lab work as well? No, typically lab work can be done with class. You want me to show the name of my microphone again? Sure, let's do that again. If you really want to buy it, again, it's optional, guys. But if you go to Blue Microphones, and if you go to the Snowball, this one, right, the one I recommend, what I'll do is I'll paste this link in eCentennial if you're interested in getting that. It's totally optional. It's not required, but and you can. There's other ways to do this as well, but hey, if you want it, here it is. So Blue Microphones Snowball, optional buy. Okay, there it is on. And that's up on Amazon. Again, there's other places you can get that as well. I just find Amazon is very convenient, and a lot of times they have stock. Okay, so that's something that you want to look at. Anyone else have any questions for this? Again, this is something you're probably going to need throughout the next couple years anyway, so it's not something that's going to be lost. Your money's not going to be thrown away on this stuff. I think it's a good purchase. And I think it's something that you could use going forward, especially when you want to communicate with somebody over Discord, or if you want to communicate with somebody over whatever you're going to be doing. If you're communicating that way, I think it's a good mic. And now the challenge is when your mic and when your speakers are separated, sometimes we get a bit of noise, but that's okay because the great thing about this mic is it only points in front of you, so it's not a 360-degree mic, which is good. 360-degree mics notoriously are bad with sound, all right, and noise, scratchiness, and all kinds of other things. So that's why I recommend something like a mic like this. Noise cancellation is also good, and if you have a good noise canceling headset and mic, that could also be another option. Some people don't like wearing headsets because they're hot, and that's totally fine. I agree with that, especially if you're if you want it to be out of the way. And that Blue Microphone Snowball Ice also comes with a bit of a stand, but I like to mount mine with a scissor arm. So usually what I do is I have a little setup, scissor arm. So I kind of do something like this where I have a little scissor arm and it kind of goes into, I don't recommend this, I mean, you go and buy this, but what I do is basically I hang the mic as I go, so that way I have nothing to do with the mic. It's out of the way, the cords are out of the way, and it continuously connects. So kind of really cool if you're interested in doing that. I think it's a better setup than if you had something like that. It was desk mounted, unless you have lots of desk space, and I know a lot of people don't. So, okay, that's tools. Any questions around this? And that was your assignment that you've been given. That's due the end of week 6. All right, let's do some, before we get into the PowerPoint, let's do some starting. So again, I talked about 7-zip, and I talked about OBS and GitHub. And your job, your homework is make sure you have all this set up for next week or next day, because I will be asking you to do certain things. with all these tools for both the lab and assignments. Okay, so please download those things as soon as you can. And again, GitHub is what I'm going to be using to share my code with you. But first, let's go back to Visual Studio 2019 here. Here I am with 2019. And we're going to open up a little console application, right? I'm going to wait for you guys to kick off 2019 here because I can't see that you're doing that right now. 2017 we'll also do right now because 2017 and 2019 for what we're doing, they're going to be identical, right? However, when it comes to code compatibility and me passing my stuff off to you, that's where I recommend getting 2019 so we're all on the same page, okay? I'm going to click next here. So whenever you do a console app, it tells you a couple things here. Again, review from last semester and this semester so far in the few short weeks you've had class. Project name. And there's also a solution name. Typically, these are the same, but you can have multiple projects in every solution. Today, we're going to call this project, and this week, it's going to be COMP123. I'm going to usually code my stuff like this, where COMP123, and it's the summer, M for summer, 2020 semester, and it's lesson 4, and then part 1. And typically what I might have is part 2, part 3, part 4. Sometimes I include multiple projects in a solution, but most of the time the solution is separate. Notice it says place solution and project in the same directory is unchecked for this one, and my .NET framework is 4.7.2. There are different .NET frameworks. Make sure you are at least something in the 4.6 plus. Anything before that, your code might respond differently than me. Okay, so I'm going to kick off this new project and click Create. Again, we code as we go here in COMP123 with me. So this is what we're going to do. Create that project. It's going to take a few minutes to do properly. And I'm going to talk about conventions with you guys a little bit as we go, because I'm going to ask you to do things from conventions from my perspective. So I'm going to ask you to do something like maybe you've seen it with Professor Narendra. I love this white screen here. And maybe you haven't, but we're going to review a couple things. One, here's something if you notice. My namespace is COMP123 M2020 Lesson 4 Part 1 because that is the name that I gave my project. So my project namespace is the same as my project. Okay, you could change this to make it whatever you like. But for now, a namespace, think about a namespace as a container that contains everything else. Again, I'm assuming for a second you know nothing, okay? We also have an entry point for our program, and the entry point typically is program.cs. You should know this from last semester. Program is where everything starts. We instantiate new objects in program, but typically what I would do is outside of the program class, I'll make other classes. So on the right-hand side where we have Solution Explorer here, I'm going to add additional information over here. Also, something else that you're going to notice is I have some of these little tricks and tips that come up like this. See these little, this is IntelliSense kind of coming up, telling me what how it should work and so on. In extensions, notice I have Resharper, and you're going to say, wait a minute, Resharper, what is that? I'm going to use Resharper throughout the semester. And Resharper is not a product that's part of Microsoft. Again, it's another tool that I want to share with you guys. So if you go up online, and if I go to JetBrains, Resharper, right? And if you go to Resharper Ultimate, the great thing about Resharper Ultimate is if you are a student, you get to use this for free. And Resharper is for .NET, Resharper C#, as well as Resharper C++. Both tools are great in terms of IntelliSense and code hinting and recommendations on how to code better. I highly recommend you download these tools. It makes my job a lot easier when I code, and it'll make your job a lot easier when you code. All right. So again, you can sign up as an educational account, and if I was to look up something like JetBrains Education, right, as an example. So there's free educational licenses from JetBrains that you can sign up for teachers and students. It doesn't take long, and you can get your license and install the Resharper extension on Visual Studio. Highly recommend. I'll put this link on eCentennial as well. Is it required? No. Do I recommend it? Yes. And I'll tell you, it's sometimes like that. So some people who don't want to use it, that's totally fine. Resharper, we'll say ultimate for students. I'll say optional download, but highly recommended. Okay, so that's where that is. If you haven't had a chance to do that yet, go to Resharper, the website there for JetBrains. JetBrains also makes other software. They make software for Android development. So if you ever want to develop on Android, they have something called Android Studio. And they also do IntelliJ IDEA, which I think is probably one of the best IDEs. By the way, I'm not getting any kind of endorsements from or anything like that from anybody, especially not JetBrains. But I think their products are really, really good and solid, guys. However, they are proprietary, which means you have to pay for them. It's not free, unless, of course, you're an educator like me or a student like yourselves. You can download the products. They're awesome products. Highly recommend them, and you'll see them in action in a second. All right, so that's another tool. Tools. Yes, it's always like that in the beginning. So again, we start off. You can see that these little underlines, and it recommends doing stuff. It says, hey, use explicit internal modifier. Hey, there's something wrong here. Use explicit private modifier if you really want to, right? And it gives you some suggestions. Now, you don't always have to accept the suggestions, but sometimes it's good to understand what Resharper is telling you to do. Okay. Next, I want to create a new class. And again, this is a review of stuff that we've done already. So I'm going to right click here on my COMP123 M2020 Lesson 4 Part 1 project. And it's inside the solution. So again, you have multiple projects potentially inside of solution. And we will need to do that when we hit testing. So whenever we do test-driven development, you will have multiple projects in here. Right now, you only have one. Okay, so I'm going to right click on the top here, right click. And what I want to add a new item. Okay, now in your quick hit menu here, you can go new item, or on the bottom there's class. Okay, again, please forgive me. I'm assuming that you know nothing right now, and that I'm just reviewing stuff with you. I'm sure you know a lot of stuff, guys, but I'm just going to go over this one more time. So for people who haven't had a chance, to go through this, I'm going to go through it one more time. So new item, let's go there instead of class. You can see that I have different objects here that I can load in. Class is what I want to hit, and let's call this, just as a review, the person class. And I'm sure you guys have done this before, but let's do it again together. So person, you can see person.cs is the class name, and then press add, right? Click on add. And what this will do is it'll go out and create a brand new person class. And the person class typically is empty like this. Usually you have a keyword class, and then the name of the class, person. Okay, and then inside the class, what kinds of things do we have inside classes? What's probably a very common thing that you'd want to include? Anyone want to answer on chat? A name. Okay, we have the name. That's the person. But what is about classes? Not specifically the person class, but generic classes. What is something that we add in usually to all classes that we do? Fields, thank you. So that would be here. So there's two types. So we have private, I'm going to just write these in comments. So private instance variables, that's what they are, or fields, right? That's what they're called. What else? What other things we have? Properties, those are good. So we have public properties, okay? What else? Methods. We have both public and private methods. So we have private methods and we have public methods. We're missing one thing typically, a constructor. Wonderful. So we've got everything. We've got the entire body of the class right now. So here's constructor. So notice what I just did here. I kind of outlined what I would do if I was creating my class. So I would have my private instance variables, my public properties, constructor, private methods, public methods, just like that. And I'm going to ask you to code your stuff just like this. I want you to document what you're doing a little bit, only because it'll make it easier for me to read and for you to understand what you need. Start with this: private instance variables, public properties, a constructor, private methods, public methods. If you do that every time, you're awesome. Okay, you got a good start happening. Okay. And again, this is for people who are just learning C#. So if you're a professional in C# already, wonderful. If you're not, let's make a couple of things here. I want to make a couple of public properties. And does anyone know the shortcut to make a public property? The shortcut in Visual Studio 2017, 2019. There is a shortcut for this. No one knows the shortcut? Okay, it's prop. If you type in prop like this, and if I press on, notice it says automatically it says property, and then it says property with a get accessor and a private set accessor. There's other ones here, but prop is what I want to type. Notice it becomes red, and if I press tab, so prop and then tab, it tabs over and creates this type. So normally what I have is the type. So for example, if I want to say I want to create a property again, let me go back and undo that. So prop tab, it takes me to type, and the first thing that I want to decide is what properties do I need. What I want is I want a name and an age for a person. So let's put in name, and usually we mark properties with a capital letter, name. Okay. But the name is going to be a string. Let's try that again. So I want to type in string name. All right. And that's a property, right? You can do a quick and dirty kind of declaration of a property just like this. However, there is the longer way to do it. Okay, I want to create a full property, and for me to do that, I need some private instance variables or fields, data fields, that I want to have here instead. So typically if I do this, this kind of does everything for me at once. Notice the getter and the setter are empty. They're the default values for getter and setter, right? But what if I want to have a field up here? So I'm going to go up here and kind of go enter. I'm going to make this private. For me, my friends, when I do private anything, I'm going to use the M underscore. So it's going to be M underscore. M is member variable. Underscore means private. Private member variable. That's what normally I do. And you're going to see the name of the private member variable, name. Okay. And of course, you need the type beforehand, which is string. So we need a string name. There it is. And you know by right away that this is a private. As soon as you see M underscore anything, it's private. Capital N for public properties, you know that's going to be public. All right. And the way we would access everything, and again, if I was going to break this out a little bit, let's just do each part differently. So I have my get area, and I also have my set area. Think about these little areas as something that I'm going to get or set. When I get something, it needs to have a return type. So I'm going to return, right? And I can use either the explicit this keyword, this dot, and you notice M underscore name. You could do that, or notice it kind of bugs out when I do that. Just this alone is good enough. And it also tries to space it kind of in one line. I don't really like it that way. I like it this way. Return, and notice it also says inconsistent body style, use expression body. Yeah, that's Resharper telling me that I could be doing this a little differently, a little less verbose. So M name is what I want to return, and when I set it, I want to set name, so I can say M underscore name is equal to value. Okay, so value again, and it's trying to reformat for me, but that's typically the way we would do it. Notice it says M underscore name, inconsistent body style, use expression body, and it's trying to help me, kind of put it together. And if I click this little button here with Resharper C++, it's actually going to do something that looks like this, but we're not going to do that right now. That's kind of more of an advanced way of doing things. For now, this is what I'm looking for when you hand in your assignments. Okay, so any kind of properties like this, private instance variables and public properties. Why do I have to have private instance variables and public properties? Why is that important? And I'm looking for, from you guys, I'm looking for a keyword that tells me security is one, but not just security, but there's something else. It's part of object-oriented programming 101. There is a principle that we're actually attacking here when we say private instance variables and public properties. What is that principle? Does anyone know it off the top of their head? Accessibility, yes, we definitely make things accessible, but there's something else that I'm looking for. Anyone else? Again, this is just to get your mind thinking a little bit as we move forward. Okay, we're going to go faster. I know I'm starting slow, and that's good, but we're going to go faster and faster as we go. This is going to ramp for us. Okay, well, it's called information hiding, and we talked about its security, so it's kind of security, but it's actually called information hiding, and it's one of the principles of object-oriented programming. We want to have private instance variables or fields and public properties. We never want to make a private instance variable into a public instance variable. And you might say, well, if you did this, Tom, I mean, it's kind of useless. You're accessing the private instance variable and there's nothing going on here. You're right. In this case, there's nothing going on here. We have a get accessor. That's what this is called. So here's the accessor. And then we have something called a set mutator. Right? That's usually what it is. A mutator modifies stuff, accessor accesses stuff. If I only have a getter and I didn't have a setter, this would be read-only. You can also use the read-only keyword up here in private. But here, you could just literally not have a setter, and then it would just be a getter, a read-only getter. All right? So get accessor, set mutator. Usually we just call these, this whole thing as a property, right, for the name field. Okay, that's what it is. Let's do it again. Let's do another one. So I want to start this time over here. I want to make a private integer, and it's going to be called age, m_age as the integer, right? So age can have a number, and notice that it's int. Int is pretty big, eh? Int, because there's something else that I could use. I mean, int is massive, right? Int can be like, you know, an age in the 30,000s or something crazy. Is anyone going to be that old ever? Chances are, probably not. Not in our lifetime. So, what other kind of data types can I use here instead of int? Anyone else have an idea? You know, I know you guys study data types in I think int 16. Let's start typing int and see what I get. So, I could get int. If I start typing int, there's int, and there's also something uint. Uint. Okay, so what is the difference between int and uint? Why would I want to use uint instead of int? What is that? Why am I bugging you with this, guys, here on a Monday morning at 11:15? Int 16 is actually smaller, that's for sure, and uint 16 is even smaller than that. And if I hover over this and I hover to understand what int16 is, it's a 16-bit unsigned integer. Why would this be good for an age? Well, because I can't have negative ages, whereas an int can, right? So this is probably a more appropriate data type than an int. However, for our time today, because we're just getting to know each other, let's just use an int for today, okay? But I just wanted to point this out, that int may not be the best data type. It's pretty fat, and if we cared about memory management as well as program bloat, we'd probably want to make this a smaller data type, something that's tighter than an int32. Okay, so then again, what I want to do is I want to use prop, right? And I want to type the type, which is an int. That property type has to match the field type. And then I want to use, again, from a convention, capital A for age for this one. Just like we did before, I want to space it out a little bit, right? And I want to create these curly braces. Typically what I do is I put curly braces around everything, even when it's a single operation. Some people don't like that. That's what I do, right? So this way, nice and clear for you guys. So return m_age. It's going to try and space it like this. I will not accept that, right? And I want m_age to be equal to value. And value is a special keyword, just to let you know. And you guys should know this already from properties, that it basically lets you assign a value for age or name, as an example with capital AH. Now, so whenever I access this class, name and age, then I can use the dot accessor to do this, okay? Dot accessor. Okay, we've done a couple of properties. This is good. I want to go into the constructor function now. And just like before, remember the constructor function? What's a key thing we have to do with the constructor to make sure it works properly? One key thing. If it's to make sure it's a constructor. It's a special type of method. What do we do with a constructor? We learned about a little bit about constructor. Name of the class. Same name, absolutely. And it's got to be the same. We call this person. The constructor has to be a person. And there's the default constructor, which takes nothing. Or we can also ask for a special constructor that takes two things. We want to maybe, when we make a person, we want to have the user add in a name and an age for the person by default. So here we'll have a name value, which is a string, and an age value, right, which is an integer. And we want to define the inside the constructor. Here we're defining the body of the constructor by default. And what we want to say is that m underscore name, this is why it's important to name things properly, is equal to name, and m underscore age is equal to age. Here it's clear. Instead of me using the same variables, names, name and name, or underscore and just underscore, anytime you see m underscore for you guys, in your mind you think member variable that's private. Member variable m underscore private. Okay, it's a private field, and it tells you that if you hover over also field, this is a parameter. Difference between a field and a parameter. Parameter is part of the method, the constructor method, and the field is part of the class. Okay, so that's this. Pretty straightforward. Okay, and we'll make one public method. We're going to make a public method that says hello. This is a classic example. So again, it's going to be the public keyword is required for a public method, and then the name of the method. Usually in C#, I use capitals for the name of the method. Says hello, right? Here we're going to have a method with says hello that doesn't return anything. So there's no return type. So if I have no return type for the method, I need to put void in front of it. Void public. And if think about this in terms of order, is it void public or public void? Right? And you notice that it's public void. It doesn't error out when you do this way. Public void says hello. Void means there's no return type. Public means that's the accessor, kind of the modifier for this particular method. It tells you that it's public. All right. And if you want to make it private, it would be private. Okay. So for says hello, we want to do a console dot write line. So console dot write line, and we're going to say that the name of the person, right? So again, there's a couple ways to do this. Their old way to do it would be something like this. So the name of the person, m underscore name, as an example, plus you can concatenate and then says hello. That's one way of doing it. Should I use the field or should I use the property? What do you recommend here in my public method? What's your thinking? Guys, you guys are programmers, you're developers. One day you're going to make some decisions. What should I do? Property. Well, there's advantages and disadvantages of doing either one. And let's talk about the advantages of using a property. The advantage of using a property is, remember that a property is powerful. A property right now is doing the same thing as just you directly accessing the private instance member. However, if you notice, properties are actually little methods of their own. They can have their own reusable code that's put right in here and right in here. And I can do other things to the properties as I use the properties compared to directly accessing something like this, right? So in here, I can say, I can use the name property. Even though I've just defined it above, I can still use the name property for something that I want to do. So name is the person's name, right? But I'm accessing the property for this, which means there might be some other side effects if I do it this way compared to direct access. Here I have a lot more choices, right? Okay, this is good. Can anyone type this differently? Can anyone do this differently than console.writeLine name plus and something else? What is the newer C# way of doing this? Can anyone type it differently? The $, okay. So I like that. So $. So where would I put the dollar sign? Would I put it inside the quotations or outside the quotations? What would I do? How do I do it? Outside. Okay, show me the code. Show me the code. Type the code inside the chat. Let's go. This is good practice for you guys to get engaged, right? So I want you guys to be in there thinking about it. Yes, okay. Dollar sign. All right, but that's inside. Wait. That's different. Wait. Okay, so dollar sign. I mean, do I really need that? So let's try this out. So if I did this, what you guys are saying. So if I said curly braces and if I said name, isn't this enough? Can I just do this? I mean, do I have to use a dollar sign? What if I just did this? Is that good enough? Right? And what does dollar sign mean? If I did dollar sign, is that make it any different? Do I put it there? Oops, undo. Do I put it here? And why would I even bother doing it like this? Well, if I did it like this, one thing to notice is if I hover over, it says it writes a specified string value followed by the current line terminator to the standard output stream. That's what this does, right? And here it's clearly code highlights what this is. This is a variable that I'm injecting. I'm doing interpolation here, right? I'm actually injecting the name here and I'm concatenating it to this particular string all in one blow, which is kind of a good way of doing it. Okay, so this is what I want. My says hello. You guys should see this now, and this is great. And what if you couldn't follow along because I was too fast and you're too slow, or you're just watching and you want to do the same thing that I did later on? Well, what I'd like to do is put it up on GitHub. This is a great place to put it up on GitHub. I've just added the person class. Notice on the bottom of my Visual Studio, down at the bottom here on the right, there's add to source control. But let's use add to source control up here. So there's a couple places I could do this. If I right click on my project, it says, notice that there isn't a place to do that. There's no add to source control here. But if I right click on my solution, right, you can see that there is indeed a place to add it to source control. You should see a place to add it to source control. So show me where that is. So here's add, and then add solution to source control. This is what I want, add solution to source control. So I'm going to click this. And again, for now, you can just watch. Notice what it did was it automatically put it on, on GitHub. It's a Git repository now. Well, guess what? There's a great extension you can download. If you go to extensions up here on the top, and if we're going to go to manage extensions, here's tools. We're talking about tools today. So one of the tools that I want you to get, if you don't have it already, is the GitHub extension for Visual Studio. It should already be checked. If you actually go there and click online in your extensions, you should see GitHub extension for Visual Studio already there, right? Also, you might see something like Resharper trial, and I don't recommend you downloading it from this. I recommend downloading it and getting it from Resharper up online, but it's totally valid to do it through here as well, okay? So you can see that GitHub extension for Visual Studio is there under extensions. Well, that means that if I go to Team Explorer, right? And by the way, if you don't have Team Explorer here in your tabs in the bottom, you can always go to View. And if you notice, Team Explorer is the second one from the top. There's Solution Explorer, which is what we were looking at before, and Team Explorer, which looks at what I'm looking at now. All right, so if you don't have it, click on this. If you do have it, you're going to see this, and you want to click on Changes, right? If I go to Changes, you can see that if there's any changes, it says there's no changes to there's unsigned changes to unstaged changes to the directory. Why? Because we've made this, thing for the first time. It's already done a commit. What I want to do instead is I want to go home, and I want to go sync. And if I go to sync, this is where the GitHub extension for Visual Studio really shines, as you don't need to do things with command line. You can just go right here and say where it says publish to GitHub. If you have a GitHub account, you can do this. You can go right here, click publish to GitHub, which is what I'm going to do. And if it recognizes me, which it does, if it doesn't, you have to do some configuration settings. For me, I don't have to do that. GitHub, it's telling me which account. I don't want to use my account. I want to use Centennial's account. So I'm going to click on Centennial. There it is. And you can see that the name that I've chosen for my project, COMP123 M2020 Lesson 4 Part 1, is the name of my repository. Guys, all I have to do at this point is click publish. And when I do this, it's going to be up online, and you're going to see the GitHub repository where you and I can compare files. So if you say something like, Tom, you went too fast, The better way to say it is Tom push. Tom push. So where is this GitHub repository? What is this thing? And how do I see it? How do I get to it? Well, if you go back to GitHub, and again, I'm going to go back to Visual Studio, or sorry, down here under Centennial College, and if I press refresh, you can see now that there is going to be a new repository up here I just made 27 seconds ago, COMP123 M2020 Lesson 4 Part 1. And if you click onto it, it's a little link. By the way, I'll give you this link right here. Here's a link. I'll put this on eCentennial for you guys so you can have it. Again, I'll make a new URL. Right? And we'll call this GitHub repo for week 4. Right? There it is. Use an external resource. And you can see it here. There it is. And I'm going to just move this up around just before the video. The video is the last thing I want to be here, and there'll be another video on Wednesday when we get together at the same time. All right, so there it is. So there's GitHub repo for week 4. So if you actually click on this, it'll take you to that link I just showed you right here. And notice what you get. You get a couple things. You get the solution stuff on the outside, and this is actually the project on the inside. So if you actually click this one, and if you go to person.cs, you can click through and you can see my code. All right, so this is everything that I've got. So somehow if yours doesn't match mine, this is where you would check. Questions about this before we move on? All I've done is made a very simple person class, and I've introduced you to a few tools, and now we're going to be doing this together. Any questions? All right, let's continue. You guys seem to have everything well in hand. Let's see if that's true. So, wow, I've got this person class now, and I want to instantiate a new object of type person. I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to do that in my program.cs file. So in my program.cs file, this is kind of the entry point to my entire application here. And what I want to do is I want to instantiate an object of type person inside of main, all right, or call a function that does that for me. So let's go here, and I want to say I want to make a new object of type person. We're going to call this person, lowercase person for now, is equal to a new person. And there is no default constructor. It's because I've defined a custom constructor that takes a name and an age as an example. So I need to put these values in. I can say that my name is Tom and my age, right? I'm going to make a number up here that's not my real number, but let's say 40, okay? And I want to specify this. See how I get this name and age thing? Look at that. I got that those two things, right? So person is equal to a new person. And then when I do this, it says, wah, something's wrong. It says that it's the person is inaccessible due to its protection level. What did I forget? I can make a toString method after. That's just something that we're going to add in later. Public, okay, interesting. Well, it actually gives me, this is what the power of Resharper C++. If I go here to this little red dot, and you don't have this right now because you haven't subscribed to it, if I click onto it, it says make constructor public. Look at that. I don't have to even do it. It just does it for me. It fixes the problem right away, and this is why I love Resharper C++. If I forget something like that, you can see what it's done. It's gone in and made the constructor public, because by default, it's private. Right, that's where the constructor is right here. Okay, so that was a problem we just overcame. Cool. And then what I want to do is I want to say person.saysHello, which is going to output our this to the console. That's what it's supposed to do, right? So now, again, if you notice up here, we have our start method. Our start, it's like a little play button. If I click start, is it going to show me the console? What is it going to do? Well, it does, but then, well, it's gone. Yeah, it's gone, right? I mean, here's where I would love for it to show me, right? That would be the nice place to show me the stuff. But it doesn't do that. And what would we do? What can we do to stop the console from going away? I want to stop the console. You guys should know how to do this, but what would you do to make the console not go away? I want the console to stay, right? I could do a read line. I can do Control F5 instead. Yes, that's good. Let's do a read line instead. So we'll say, before we says hello, the person says hello, we're going to do a read line, or just after. So we'll say something like, you know, wait for a person to press the key or whatever, right? So we can do a read line, right? And it's a console.readline. If I just put a read line like this, right, is that good enough? No, but again, Resharper C++ says, hey, do you want to make a, you know, the read line, or do you want to use console.readline? Is that something that you want to use, right? Is that how it's going to work? Console.readline. And then what this will do is we'll wait for a key for it to happen. If I did this again, and if I press start, now it says Tom says hello. And that's what we should see here in the console. And if I press enter, it'll go away, right? Because I've given it what it wants. It wants an entry point. So this, again, some code. Wait for a user to enter anything. And then once they've done enter anything, then it's going to shut the console down, or Control F5, whichever way you prefer. This is a pretty good method because it stops operation until that happens. Okay? So person says hello. Are you with me? And are you understanding what I've just done? Anyone not understand or have a problem with anything that we've just done? If you have a problem, please say so. I can go through it with you in 2 seconds. I know you guys are saying yes, yes, yes. But here is some of the new stuff that we want to talk about, right? So, cool. I have a person class, and it's okay. It's pretty good. And someone mentioned, I want to more about the $sign. I will. Let's get back to this other stuff. So, someone said I should override the toString method, and is that really a good thing to do? And I think it is, right? I think it's a good thing to do. So if I was to override, if I said like public toString, right? Notice that my code hinting says to override the public toString, and that's how it should probably look, like this. So public override string, that's what it returns, toString, right? And then what I want to return is some kind of string. So what if I wanted to say, I want to cast this thing as a string, this name class, as an example. Well, maybe what I want to do instead is I want to create a string, right? So I want to say that here's my output string, which is of type string. Maybe I'll do it this way, right? And I want to initialize it with something like this. String is an empty string, let's just say. And what I want to do here is I want to output the name and the age. So I can make it a little bit more fancy than this. I could say something like my output string, undo, output string, right, plus equals to the name, right, where I want to add in the name of the person. Remember that I could just add curly braces and go name, right? Let's try this way instead. And then I want to do output string and then plus equals. And then what I want is the age. Let's format it nicely so we can see what that looks like, age. You can see that that works okay. Notice it just automatically puts a $sign in there for me when I press space, because Resharper C++ is looking out for me, right? Saying, hey, Tom, you're forgetting a $sign. The $sign is required for this C#, latest version of C# to do interpolation with curly braces, right? There's a little bit more about the $sign. And I also want to add a space between the two. I want to do it like a right line. And there is a character typically that we want to use. It's \n. \n is a control character that takes us to the new line, right? New line character. Okay, so then it shows us age. And then what I want to do is, instead of returning toString, we want to output the output string. I want to kind of output that thing. So I create an output string, I add to the output string, you know, as an example, I return the output string, and now I have my toString method. And what I want to do also when I do this kind of thing is I want to document this thing nicely. So what you can do with documentation in C# is do the //. // really talks about what this thing does. So this method overrides the you know, kind of the superclass toString method. That's what the output is. And what does it return? You can also say this in a, it returns so we can say returns this method returns formatted string that displays the class's properties that are class properties. Okay, so I'm just giving some documentation here. Yay, right? Nothing too crazy. Well, why is this really good? Because if I did this here, and if I go back to my program.cs, sure, I could use says hello, but sometimes what I want to do is I want to see the whole class. So I want to do something like person.toString, and if I hover over toString, right, it tells me what it does. Is this method overrides the superclass toString method, and this method returns the same thing I typed. But this returns a string, and what I want to do is I want to use this as input to my console write line. So console.writeLine, right? And I want to do this person.toString. I'll be okay. And that was what I can do. I can use person.toString as an input, a parameter to the console.writeLine, and this will output it. And this is what you probably already learned how to do. Okay, maybe not exactly this way. If you really want to be a stickler, you want to do this on another line, you could just say something like string, you know, we'll call this the person string, right? And you could make this equal to this, right? You could do it this way if you want to go a long ways, and just pass in the person string. Person string. There we go. So that's another way to do it, which is a little bit longer, but it has the same effect. Okay, so notice that this is good. Okay, let's try this out now and run it. And let's see if we get the output we were expecting. Yay, hello, and then name is Tom, age is 40. We did that here, right here. Maybe also what I like to do when I have a output like this, because this is normally for debugging purposes, maybe what I want to surround this thing by stuff, output string, plus equal to some kind of, I don't know, pluses, whatever, you know, to kind of highlight what it is, right? And I also want to do a \n here, so a new line, right, which you can do, an output string, and then you can do the same thing here, and of course you need a new line character there, right? So now you're formatting it so it looks nice, and what you want to also do is maybe add in some other things here. So maybe you want to surround this thing to make it look like what it's supposed to. A lot of times, by the way, when I do this kind of stuff, I even space out this. It doesn't matter how you space it out, so you can see what it looks like. I think this is good to do, and sometimes we have to play around. If you really want to format this nicely, you'd have to play around to kind of you know, space up the exact amount, right? So that way it looks just perfecto, right? Perfect. All right, so that's kind of what it might look like, but there's a problem here, and you're going to notice this, because if the name is long, then it's going to push this. If the age is longer, like if it's or if it's single digit, it's going to change this. If it's a double digit, it's going to change this. This is not great to do all the time, but hey, we're doing it right now. Okay, let's see what that looks like now when we run it, and we want to even do this. See, so it kind of didn't do exactly what I was hoping it would do, right? Why? Because of this extra spacing here that I got with Tom and 40. I'm going to get less because this part here is curly brace 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 6 characters, and this is 4 characters. I've spaced it according to this, and it's not spaced according to this, and that's why doing this kind of stuff I don't recommend. All right, because you don't know what it's going to look like. Definitely the / characters you can put in there. You can leave it like this. That's not bad, but as an example, you may not want to put the plus in there. If you want to do anything, maybe what you want to do is definitely space in a little bit just to make it look like that. So you can see that it's debug output, but that's probably the most you want to do. All right. So again, let's stop that and let's run that again. And you can see now when we run it again that boom, we get that nice output. Also, what I sometimes like to do, especially when you're getting this output for the first time, is do a \n character right at the beginning, right? So that way it gives me a space all the time. So if I run this now, you can see that it's going to space down, right? That plus at the end. How's that? Is that better? So that kind of gives me the name of the class. The toString method is something that we want to use as something that's reasonable to do, okay? All right, so I've shown you a couple things to do, right? A name, age, right, and so on. What other things can people have? It's a generic person, and generic people aren't that really useful for us because generic people are kind of not realistic, right? So what you can do instead, right, and this is going to that little PowerPoint that I put up online here. I gave you another little PowerPoint called Intro to Inheritance. And if you take a look at that, I want to make a class that's more useful, right? I want to make a class that's more useful. And I'm going to pull up this document for you guys just to show you what I'm talking about. And then I'll get back into the regular flow of things. All right. So bear with me as I jump around. So it says Chapter 10 because it is from Chapter 10. But basically what it is I want to extend my class to make it more useful. I want to make a specialized version of my class. I've got my class right now and it's the person class. But the person class has no context whatsoever. There is no person in real life, not a generic person. We're different kinds of people. Sometimes we're students or professors, or we might be, especially from a business application perspective, I could be a customer or a order taker or whatever it's going to be. So I usually have more specialization than just a generic person, right? So what we may want to do instead, we're going to go through this over the next couple of weeks, right? What I want to do instead is, let's go back to this. Can we think about a more specialized person for us? Well, yes, we can. We have a person, but I also have a student. That's a type of person. A student also is going to have a name and is also going to have an age, right? Remember that a class is a blueprint, right? I can have more than one person. For example, if I go back to my program here, I can have this person, Tom, and maybe what I want to do is I want to rename this. So right click, refactor, rename, and I want to make this Tom. So Tom says hello. It's more contextual, right? Tom toString. I want to output what Tom is, right? I can have another person here as well, right? So where I have, and by the way, let's rename this to Tom string, rename, refactor, rename, just if we're going to go there, to Tom string, right? String version of Tom, that's what it means. I could have another person, right? I could include another person in here. So I could say something like person, let's, make a person Jackie, right? And this new person is going to have a name that's Jackie and an age that's 22, right? Okay, so Jackie's 22 years old. I can do the same thing. I can always do Jackie.sayshello, right? As well as this same thing here. I could do the same thing. Let's do it on one this time, console.writeLine. And in my console.writeLine, I'm just going to do Jackie.toString, right? There we go. So just doing it all at once as opposed to splitting it up like this. Okay, so I have two people now. I have a person that's Tom, and I have another person object that's Jackie. These are two objects. I'm instantiating. We say we instantiate an object Tom, and we instantiate an object Jackie. That's what we're doing here. We're breathing life into these things. It's almost like, poof, I'm teleporting a new person Tom and a new person Jackie. So if I was to do this now, and let's just add another, just for me, a console, just to space everything properly, console.writeLine. Oop. There we go. Empty console writeLine, just to space it out properly. And then if I was to run this thing, you're going to see two, right? I have Tom says hello, Jackie says hello. You know, Tom is named Tom, age 40, and Jackie is named Jackie, age 22. Different objects, different values for the properties that we made. And this is an example of making different objects, right? So this is cool. But they're really useless objects, right? Because Jackie and Tom are just people. And it doesn't make sense. right? We want something more contextual. So imagine if I want to have the ability for me to have this name and this age, right? But I also want to have more properties in this and these specialized types. So I could, here's something I could do. Let's make a student class. So I want to do this. This is the long way and the dumb way. Add. I want to make a new class this time, right? We'll call this class student. So here's student. And you know what? Let's just copy paste. Warning, warning, warning. Once you hear copy paste from me, that is an indicator that something better could be done than what I'm doing here. So really what I'm saying is let's just copy all this stuff, right? This is the long, dumb way to do it, right? I copy all this stuff from my Tom class, or my person class, into my student class. And the only thing we have to really change is the constructor. It can't be called person anymore. It's got to be called student. And you know what? We could add to it, right? We have a couple of properties here, age and name. Let's add one more, the student number, student ID, private. We're going to make it a string. We'll call it M_student ID, right? That's okay. And then what I want to do is just copy paste one of these instead of me doing it by hand. I already have, you know, that's probably not the right one to copy paste. Let's copy paste this one because it's already a string. So I could go over here and copy paste this one and call this, you know, a student ID, like this. And what we want to do is M_return student ID, and this one will be M_student ID is equal to value. So all this is done. We have a new property, student ID. Yeah, is that true? We have everything else, the same as this, the person class, but with student has extra stuff, right? And you know what? We have to also do this. So we're going to say that in my constructor function, I want to take a name, an age, and it's required to have a student ID. String student ID. Notice that inside my parameter list, that whenever I have a parameter that has two names, I usually separate them with an underscore. That is a convention I'd like you to use. Okay, next. I could set M_student ID is equal to student ID. Okay, so you can see that that makes sense. We've done all the same things. We have a says hello function, right? So far we've done everything the same. And let's add one more function in here. A public void. We'll say studies, right? Actually, we'll do it right. Is studying, right? Well, is studying is kind of like, it says, are you studying or not? So that could be like almost like a Boolean. Are you studying or not? Yes or no? Let's do studies. I like that studies. Studies. Okay, again, it's void. And what I want to do is I want to do a console.writeLine. And we're going to say that kind of the same thing that we set up here. The name, right? Whatever, it says hello. Instead of the name saying hello, the name now, whoever the name is studying. Okay, there we go. Says, let's actually put a little dot in here. It's a complete sentence. Says hello, is studying. Yay. And, you know, down in here, let's add another property to the mix because we want to have this separate. And we're going to say that student ID is a thing. Student ID. And we're just to make this look nice, we're going to space it out nicely when we output things to the longest property name, student ID. So name, age, and this would be student ID. Sorry, so I'm just spacing it out. You can see that that's what's happening. There's a danger that we're going to go over this plus limit, so let's add a few more pluses. Right, another bad thing about formatting of this type, right? So we've got pluses, and looks like we're okay. Did I make it the same length? Who knows? No. That's the same length now. Okay, so that is cool, and you know what? We'll add a couple spaces here for this, and backslash student ID does everything as normal. It's the exact same thing. I've copy pasted from one thing to the other, and it's identical. Student and person are the same, except that student has additional property and private instance field, and it has a new method called studies. And again, if I was going to document the method just like I did down here, studies, the student is studying, and then the student says hello, right? But same thing, right? Really, it's identical. So now if I was to go and run it, if I go to program, I could literally say that, you know, student, and we'll say Joss, right? Joss is a student, and he is a new student. And now you can notice I have 3 things I need to put in: the name Joss, his age 22, he's also 22, and his student ID is 123456789 0. There we go. Big, and maybe we'll put an A in there too. A 123456789 0. There we go. Okay. So that is a student, and what I want to do here is just like the same thing. I'll say Joss dot says hello, right? As well as Joss is our studies. Oh, student, no, studies, right? Joss studies, Joss says hello, and you know what? We'll do a console log with the toString. So console log will say that Joss toString, right? And just to make sure that there's a separation between one and the other, we'll add an extra console log. Console log, console write line. And once we've done this, well, we should have everything we need, yeah? Okay. It has me this little underline. It says typo in identifier Joss. It's trying to think I'm saying Josh, but I'm not. Joss is actually a name, so I'm using that one. And I'm ignoring the recommendations. All right, and let's run this thing and see if it works. And you guys should have this output. Joss says hello, Joss is studying, and name is Joss, age 22, student ID is blah, blah. Yeah? And of course, it looks like my pluses are incorrect compared to what I had them before. And the way to fix this weird problem is to go back to student, and I don't know what I was thinking. I forgot the \n here. Yeah, that's just too long. I got a couple of extra characters, 1, 2, and let's just run that again. Right? Excellente. So that's pretty good. We've got 2 different things, but what a waste of time, right? It's not a waste of time. I mean, they're identical. Person and student are like so similar. They're like mirrors of each other. In fact, I've copied and pasted. Once you hear copy and paste, guess what I'm doing? I'm repeating myself. And one of the rules we're going to be talking about is the dry rule. Dry, right? Do not repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself. And if I'm repeating myself, that's a great indicator that I'm doing something wrong, right? And I could be doing something better. So, let's put this version up on GitHub. I'm going to go to Team Explorer. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes. Under Changes, you're going to see these are the things we've changed. I'll say I added the student class. That's what I've done. I'll commit all, and then I'll go Home. Just have to watch for now, and we'll go through this in detail another time. Sync and push. And when I do that, it's going to go up online, and you're going to see all my code up on GitHub, just like we've done before. All right, and it's just pushing right now. You can see that that's just taking its sweet time doing that. Okay, great. And then if I go back to GitHub, and if I go back to that and refresh, you can see now I also have student up here, so you can see both student and person, and they're pretty much the same, but both are fairly useless. Okay. Wow, that's, not happy. I want to make this better. So here's a preview of what we want to do with inheritance. I want to inherit, that's what inheritance is. I want to inherit or have access to the same properties that I would normally have in person with my student, but I want to make a more specialized person, right, without copying. And that's how I can use inheritance. So let's now change the student class so it uses inheritance as opposed to it being totally a class all of its own with a lot of copying. Well, we've done some of the work already, but here's what we need to do. Up on the top here where we say class student, we're going to add another mark, all right? And this little colon, right, typically what we want to do, there's 2 ways. If I type in other languages, you would type in Java, you would type the word extends. Here in C# we don't do that. We just type colon. And then we type the name that it inherits from, person. Okay? So whenever you read this sentence, and if I ask you a question on a test and I say, how would you read this? You're going to read it like this. The class student inherits from person. In other words, it takes everything from the person class and specializes it even further. Okay? Here's what I don't need now. Because person already has name and age, as well as the name property and the age property, I don't need to put that again in this student class. In fact, I can just erase these. Hear me out. Follow me here for a second. Okay, I know it's weird, but don't worry. I'm not going to hurt you, I promise. And then when I get rid of all this, right, you can see that it's still good, right? I can still do this, person, student, student ID, right? Here, I don't have direct access anymore to person, to these properties. In fact, what I need to do is I need to use the property instead. So name is equal to name, and age is equal to age. And same thing with my student ID. I might as well use the property student ID because this is okay. We're going to fix the other class as well. So here's something. Public student, it says, and well, we got a problem, right? We're missing something. We also have to call the base class, right? The base class. So to do that, we're going to call the base superconstructor, which is going to be called the, we're going to use the keyword base, and we're going to pass in the things that it needs. Name, age, right? That's what it needs, okay? And I'll go back to this in a second. Hear me now, okay? I don't need to do this anymore, right? Because that's being done in the constructor of the previous class. It's already taking name and age. I'm just passing them into the constructor function, right? And again, if you don't understand, it's totally cool. Just watch for a second, okay? This is the structure that you need to put it in. By the way, sometimes it's written like this, like with a space, so that you can see that the base class is the person class, is the super class, it's the parent class. There's different ways of talking about this, okay? Again, I don't need says hello because it's already been defined in the person class. I do need studies because this is a specialization. And I do need to override the toString value because guess what? My toString is going to be different than the generic person toString, right? Because this toString also includes student ID and the other one does not, okay? We're done. We've got a new class called student, which inherits from person. All right, inherits from or extends person. Does everything still work? Let's see. If I go to program.cs, no errors. And if I run it, then it's good. It's the same. Exactly. And there's less code in the student class. The student class is actually shorter, right? However, don't be fooled by it being less code. What actually is happening is I have everything in the person class plus everything in the student class in my student. So the way it works is this. If I was going to draw a diagram, right? Let's draw some diagrams. Right? So here is my little diagram drawer. Let's think about this as the whiteboard. And I have a class, right? We're going to call this class the person class. Here's my person class, right? And my person class here is, it has two properties, right? It has an age and a name, which are public age, right? And it's kind of got get set. And I'll put this, make it look proper. This is probably what you're going to see. So this is that, right? And I also have a public name, which is also get set. I might as well talk about the types because that's important, and maybe if I can type properly, that would be good. So public what? Public int, right? And a public string for name. And I've defined them in different order. Let's put them in the same order just to be for completeness. So I got these two things here. So, there we go. And we'll put them in there, and we'll make them a little smaller so they can fit. There we go. Yeah? And then what we want to do is we make another thing like this. When we draw our diagrams, and I'm making a very rough diagram here. So we'll make another diagram down here. Another box, and we'll make this student, right? So this student is right here, and what we want to do is we don't have these in student, right? We have a public string that's called student ID, right? And here we also have a get set. Notice my curly braces went away because it doesn't understand what I want. That's okay. Okay, there we go. And I want to move this over a little bit so it's inside here. So this is what we look at. Now we also have a couple of methods. We have our says hello method. So it says hello, right, which is a method that returns void. So public void says hello. That's that method that belongs in the person class. That's the one method that's different, right? And we also have, let's just do these layers again. We also have a public studies method, which is also returns void. Okay. And I probably forgot the curly brace there. It's okay. You get the point. And what I need is a little line that kind of goes from, and you may have seen this before, it goes from here to here with a little arrow like this. This means that student inherits from person. It has everything that person has, and it has all this stuff too. So now here comes the question to you guys, as you guys have been watching, right? Question 1. Which one is fatter? The parent or the child? The base class, this is also called the base class. So let's call this base. Here's the base class. So base class, and again, I'm gonna draw a little line that basically it's just for identification purposes. So this is the base class, right? And or the child class. Here's the child class, or the derived. We also say it's the derived class. Derived is a good name, good word for it. Base class and derived class, right? So, my friends, I need you to tell me which one is fatter in terms of usage. Child is fatter. Derived, yes, it's true. It's true. And I want you to always think about this. Whenever we make a class and then I inherit from it, I inherit everything that I have from the person class into the student class, right? I have everything that's inside the person class, plus I have the student class's stuff. Guess what? The student class, which is the child or the derived class, as an example, this new class that we have, right, is actually fatter. It's bigger. Why? Because we include everything from the parent in addition to everything else in the student. It's more specialized. So one of the things we can say about child class or derived classes is that they're more specialized. Right? Why? Because it has more stuff. Right? It has things that the parent doesn't have. Right? So that's one thing that that we always want to say about a child class or a derived class. Okay, by the way, I'm using different words, but they mean kind of the same thing. More specialized, right? This is more generic, right? And why would we want to do the person class in the first place? Why don't we just make the student class and not even bother with the person class? Well, there's other classes that we can make that have the same pattern, but have different things here than a student. For example, could we not make another class that also inherits from person but's different than student? Let's think about this as a teacher, right? As an example. So here's a teacher. The teacher is like the student, right? In that it's a person, right? But it doesn't have a student ID and it doesn't necessarily study, right? A teacher maybe has another thing. Maybe it has an employee ID, right? As an example, instead of a student ID. So public string, here's an employee ID, right? Which also has getter and setter. It's a public property. right? And also, maybe we'll also include a public method called teaches, right? So void teaches, right? So that's something that it can have. That's different, right? It's different than the student ID. The student, it's different than the student. But however, it still has, sorry, I didn't fit this in. I apologize. I'm not going to fit it in. But it still has the same name and age, because the teacher is still a person, right? Well, we would think that they are, right? Let's be honest. So let's make another little line that goes like this. I'm just making the line so it's this way. It's usually not like this, but I'll make it point to it as well. So you can see that the teacher and the student are both part of the person class. But a teacher is differently specialized than a student. Okay? Employee or teacher or a bunch of other ones, right? Okay? Hey, how about this? Could you have a more specialized student? Right? We're talking about. And the answer is yes, you can. And we'll just draw that out in a second, and then we'll stop for the day. Right? We can have another type of student, right? And I'm going to make this called this an international student. Right? An international student. Right, here we go. And there might be differences. I'm not going to talk about what the properties it could be. You could have maybe a international address that's different than a domestic student, right? There's an international student, and it can have an international address. Maybe there's also a domestic student. So here we go. I want to talk about this a little bit before we even make any more classes in code, right? First, we talk about this as in, you know, to kind of talk about this. So this is a domestic student. By the way, these are all classic examples, guys. So I have a different kind of students. Let's suppose they have their own properties and methods because we're running out of time, right? Here's a question for you. Is the domestic student a student? Yes or no? Yes. Great. Is the domestic student a person? Good for you. That's good that you say yes. Yes, it is. It is a person. And so every time we have a class, we can, and especially when we talk about inheritance, we can say that the student we use this is a relationship. That's what we have. It is a relationship, right? With the person. So, and the same thing goes with the student. International student is a student, but it's also a person. Here's a question. Is a domestic student a teacher? I mean, they both come from the person class. No, they're not the same. In fact, a teacher will have a different specialization completely because it comes from a different branch. See, it's like a tree structure, right? And we'll talk about the positives and negatives of inheritance. There's positives and negatives about it, but this is where I want to end off for today. Okay, so we talked about a couple things. We've made a class. I put it up on GitHub. Any questions before we end for the day? Because we're going to come back to this diagram on Thursday a little bit. Can a child have two or more parents? No, that's multiple inheritance. A child can only have one parent. That's the rules of C#. In other languages like C++, it can have more than one parent, because we're going to use multiple inheritance. Here in C#, it's single inheritance. You can only have one parent, okay? And there's reasons for this we'll talk about, okay? Any other questions? All right, guys, I'm going to let you guys go early, about 10 minutes. Thank you so much for coming out. This is our first lecture together, week 4. We're going to be also talking about the PowerPoints that I put up. Please look forward to the YouTube video if I went too fast, and try it out yourself. Try and make other little classes like this. Why don't you, for homework for next day, can you try to make a domestic student and an international student? We'll go do it together. It's not a lab, but I want you guys to try doing a domestic student and an international student by next day. And then let's see what you guys come up with. You guys can share your screens or something like that next day. I want you to see if you guys can do that. It's good practice for you to do it. See if you can do it. All right. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much. I'll see you on Wednesday, same time, and using Zoom. Any questions? Guys, thank you so much. I'll end the stream for today. And if you have any questions,